like millions of Australians, I am getting increasingly agitated by this movement to ignore Australia Day on the 26th of January. As it so happens, I will be on air with my new Friday night show here on Sky on Australia Day on the 26th of January. We will celebrate the welcoming to our great country of new migrants, lucky enough to find a local council still brave enough to hold a citizenship event on the 26th. I'll cross to a number of remote regional Australian towns not infected by lefty woke ignorance to recognise the wonderful Australian volunteers. You know who I mean. The firefighters, the lifesavers, the SES men and women. You know the ones, the selfless people who turn up at floods and bushfires. We'll talk to those nominated in the Australia Day honours list, presuming that the new federal government still has an Australia Day honours list. I say presume because I don't really detect any great enthusiasm for January 26 coming out of Canberra. And as we're increasingly seeing, once you let a national day like Australia Day get chipped away at, the mindless mob pour in. It's bad enough we have to put up with Invasion Day protest marches that this year will foolishly, or should I say ignorantly, attempt to link the conflict in Gaza following the terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel. They want to link it with the idea that somehow the British settlement of Australia and the arrival of the First Fleet has something in common with Palestine. All that's bad enough. But then you have the supermarkets dumping Australia Day branded merchandise, 81 councils in Victoria alone cancelling migrant ceremonies, and now it's the turn of tennis. Now, the Herald Sun reports today that despite the biggest global sporting event that Australia holds being into the semi-finals, on Australia Day itself, organisers at Tennis Australia have chosen not to celebrate the day itself on the 26th. Now, this started last year and ended Australia Day celebrations. They used to feature fireworks, the playing of the national anthem and special musical events to mark the day at the tennis. So on the 26th, a shameful silence this year. A silence made so much worse when you consider the 2-week tournament sets aside a day. It was this Wednesday this week. It sets aside a day for First Nations Day. It was launched proudly by Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley, as it should have been. So we have First Nations Day, no drama from me about that. Then the organisers have set aside a day for Australian Open Pride Day. We have an Australian Open All Abilities Day and an Australian Open Glam Slam for the LGBTI plus folk that will run across January 26 to January 28. The Open even has a day, can you believe it, set aside for its major sponsor, an Italian beer company called Peroni. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. If possible, the final nail in the anti-Australian Australian Open, the Aussie Hall of Fame event that will this year unveil a bust of that proud Australian Davis Cup star and now captain Leighton Hewitt, will not be held, as was tradition, on Australia Day. Guess what? It's been moved to January 24. I kid you not. And by the way, welcome to country ceremonies are played on the stadium's big screens before the start of play every day and every night the tennis is on. Can anyone at Tennis Australia defend this disgraceful snubbing of our national day by a tournament that carries the name of our nation? It will be very interesting to see who is sitting in the VIP seats on Australia Day at Rod Laver Arena. It better not be the Prime Minister. And it must be particularly galling for Victorians, whose then Andrews state government handed over $100 million of taxpayers' money to bail out Tennis Australia, who were broke post-COVID. Look, it's a pity the woke directors who run Tennis Australia don't have the courage to drag the South African bloke running the organisation, South African mind you, Craig Tiley, into line and insist we recognise the great nation that lends its name to his tournament.